go. Click on the PowerPoint again. You know? Okay, good. You tell me when you're ready. It's all good. Okay, great. Thanks, buddy. That's awesome. So we've been doing a series, a 4-part series called How to Suck at Your Religion. It's not hard, by the way. If you want to suck at your religion, it's really easy. Uh-oh. John's trying to pull me. He's psyching me out here. We're good. So, 4-part series. We're on part 3 right now, and the theme today is hypocracy. And that song, which is kind of, what genre of music would you describe that song that I played as the lead? Punk rock kind of, eh? Punk/rock. Yeah, I loved it actually. She's a really good singer. Forgot her name now, but anyways, the song is called Hypocracy. So it was a good fit for today's talk, and if you read through the lyrics, you'll see that it's in regards to a relationship. So, you know, obviously a romantic relationship, but in it she's singing about the hypocrisy that kind of was embedded in that relationship and typified that relationship. So that's what we're going to look at today, is the issue of hypocrisy. In other words, people who talk the talk but don't walk the walk. And this does happen in the church, sadly. In fact, I would say, of all the complaints I hear about church, the Christian church, that's probably the biggest one. Like the biggest barrier to people investigating spirituality in a Christian context is the fact that they say, well, it's all full of hypocrites, why would I go in that organization? Now, the thing I would say is, whether or not it's got a bunch of hypocrites or a few hypocrites or whatever, doesn't actually define whether or not what God said about himself is true. Right? The fact that the church might be 99.98% full of hypocrites doesn't mean that what God has revealed about himself is not true. It just means that a whole bunch of people who are claiming to be true followers probably aren't. They got the message wrong. And that's happened throughout the history of the church. So the point I want to emphasize here is, yes, there are hypocrites in the church. You will run into them. It's important we challenge that. We obviously don't want that to happen in Cafe. And it does happen from time to time. And we need to fix it if it does happen. But just because the church may have a lot of hypocrites in it, or have people who are famous, you know, who kind of give the church a bad name, doesn't mean that it's not true. It just means some people who are laying false claim to it are giving it a bad name. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And then next week we're going to look at this issue about self-centeredness, or, you know, it's all about me, and not wanting to, for example, be part of a healthy community. So what I would say to you is this. So this is what we're going to do today. We're going to do a review of last week, part 2. We're going to talk about talking and walking in a general sense. We're going to look at a biblical perspective with a story and then a challenge time like we usually do. So I just want to say that this church is not full of hypocrites. There's always room for more. Got it?
Good one.
Kidding. Just kidding. I love this quote. This is a good quote. So we try to expunge hypocrites from our church. Right? Or correct people first. That's the first step. And if people aren't correctable, then I'm sorry, you know, there's no place for you here. If that's sort of the perspective you're going to have. We haven't had very many instances of it, but over the years, there's been a couple times when people were in leadership and were not living by biblical values. We're going like, well, how can you say on the one hand you're going to do one thing, and then on the other hand, you know, you're doing something else? That's hypocritical. You're being a bad witness. And this is what you need to change. And if they don't change, then there's lots of precedents, I suppose, in Scripture to say, well, that person needs to be encouraged to move on. And in a couple of cases, very rare cases, that's happened here at Cafe. It probably doesn't happen enough in the church, to be quite frank. I think that's probably why people think the church is full of hypocrites, because, you know what, it probably in some cases is. So what we're going to do to start out then is we're going to do a review. So from last week, when is it okay to look down on others?
Never bring them up.
When you're, what? Who said never?
Me.
Okay, that was one answer. But then you guys gave me 2 more last week.
Yes. When you're physically above them.
When you're physically above them. Very good. Yes, absolutely. I can't help but look down at Vicky. I'm sorry, Vicky. I mean, if you came up on stage and I sat in a chair, we'd be okay. I would not look down on you, I swear. Okay? But, hey? So never look down on someone unless you're helping them up. Those are the 2 instances when it's okay. But otherwise, we don't want to do that. Now, we looked at a Bible story, Sermon on the Mount. Does anyone remember what the key teachings were from chapter 6 of that passage about the Sermon on the Mount?
Is it that they weren't believers, but they still came to see the miracle and everything?
Yes. Okay. So this is the setting for it, right? Is Jesus has been around healing people like crazy, and has incredible teachings, and a buzz is being created, right? Like Jesus is starting to go viral in a first century Palestinian or Roman province context. Word's getting out. Something big's happened. That's why all these people showed up, because many of them had illnesses and diseases and injuries and so on they were not cured of, or they were seeking deeper teaching and wanted a more real experience of God. So they flocked to Jesus, and that's where this sermon took place. Probably on the side of a hill, and people gathered around. No AV, no mic, no PowerPoint. I don't know how he did it without PowerPoint. It's amazing. But Jesus is sitting down telling people, and so the Sermon on the Mount has many, many teachings in it. It's considered to be one of the most exceptional sets of moral code or teaching that you can find, and it's used in non-biblical context quite frequently. People will often quote phrases from this passage without really understanding where it came from, just because they like the idea of it, right? Morally, it makes sense. But Jesus homed in on two specific issues regarding the religious leaders of his day. Does anybody remember what those issues were? Two specific practices.
Oh.
Yep, go ahead,
Not
sir.
showing off.
Okay, very good.
Not in fasting, like.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they put a big show on it. Oh, I've been fasting for 24 hours.
Yeah. And then praying on the corners too.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I'm praying in public with lots of flourish and
attention.
Yeah, just to get attention. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't pray in public. That's not what I'm saying. It's about why you're praying in public. If you're praying in public because you're trying to bring people into corporate prayer, like the church did last Sunday in their lawn, that's totally fine. But if it's like just to draw attention to yourself, we're going to see an example today, a real life example, then from a modern context, then that's not the right motivation to do it. Okay, so that's good. Yeah, those are the two things he reprimanded them for, and he actually called them hypocrites, which is kind of a segue into this week. So there's the two passages, right? So they prayed publicly in the street corners where everyone can see them, and for fasting they try to look miserable and disheveled so people will admire them for their fasting. Oh, I'm such a martyr. Look at what I've done. Look at me, look at me, look at me. Right? So these are the two things Jesus condemns, and two of the things that Jesus condemns. So we're going to build on that a bit. Jesus has some more interactions with some of the religious authorities, and this gives us a good segue in today. So, what does it mean to be hypocritical? Sarah?
To do something and then tell, like, I think it is anyway, to do something and then, or tell someone not to do something maybe, and then go do it.
Okay, so you're not, your actions are not following what you said you're telling other people to
like,
do,
do
right?
as I say, not as I do.
Exactly, yes, very good. Absolutely, that's a great way to phrase it. That's an excellent summary of it. Anybody else? What's up, Paul? Oh yeah, the kettle calling the teapot black, right? Great phrase, right? Yeah, we're two different people, but hey, we all been cooked on the same stove, right? Yeah, absolutely. Very good. That's a great phrase. You guys said two excellent phrases to summarize that up. That's good. Anybody else want to take a shot at what the idea of hypocrisy is about, or what hypocrite is?
I would something like experience myself with certain kinds of churches was they kind of pick and choose what they want to do for themselves.
Okay.
And then impose all these other
Yes.
things that even though they've been exaggerated on other people.
Yeah, and I've used the example in the past of the church my wife grew up in, where for a period of time, all women had to wear dresses and no makeup. Right? That was a period of time in the history of that church. And then as she grew up, they said, well, we should put our best on for God, so everyone wore makeup. Well, that's just totally arbitrary. Like, it's just a man-made rule. It has nothing at all to do with how close you are to God or how God sees you, whether you wear tattoos or what color your hair is totally irrelevant, right, in how you dress. And in fact, the only two commandments, or the only two specific teachings in the New Testament on dress are actually condemnations for people overdressing. Right? So kind of like how we're dressed today, like I got a clean t-shirt on, that's good, eh? That's to me is more appropriate to the sort of biblical, and all those people that Jesus is talking to in the Sermon on the Mount, they don't have good clothes, they're peasants, right? They basically, 90% of the people are living subsistence living, they're not wealthy people, they just show up in their everyday clothes. So you're absolutely right, Sean, there are Often what happens, the way we see hypocrisy in the church is certain rules are created or certain regulations are added on, and they're selective about which ones they are, and then that's imposed on everybody. So one of the big ones Juanita had to deal with when she was growing up was that basically no one would say that it wasn't the case, but they kind of hinted it was. So it was speaking in tongues. So she grew up in a Pentecostal church. This church is Pentecostal in its theology, which is to say we accept speaking in tongues and interpreting tongues. We don't do it a lot in the morning service, but maybe something more that would happen in the evening service. But there was kind of this expectation if you didn't speak in tongues, you weren't a real Christian. There was a lot of pressure on people to speak in tongues. And, you know, the temptation then would be just to do it to make everybody happy, right? So you fit in. So those are some examples of how hypocrisy can creep into the church. There are a lot of other ones, though, unfortunately, and a lot of it has to do around televangelism and mass marketing of church. And this actually is where we see a really ugly side of it.
What's televangelism?
It's a lot of the TV preachers you see, you know, send your money in now, I'll pray for you. You're going to see an example here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's lots of them out there. There's no shortage. No shortage, let me tell you. Sadly. Okay, so a hypocrite. It's a noun, a person who pretends to have virtues, moral, or religious beliefs, principles, or practices that he or she does not actually possess, especially a person whose actions belie stated beliefs. In other words, their actions don't line up with whatever they've told you. So, for example, I'm in the military, and one of the things we talk about in the military is leadership by example. So I had this highlighted to me some years ago. I had a boss who was a great boss. His name was Michel Duhamel. He was my battery commander. I worked for him. I was a captain. He was a major. And he told me one day, he said, so what happened was we had two 12-hour shifts. I would be the night shift and he was the day shift and in the command post. And he said, during your shift, you need to go out and visit all the troops at least once. Go to all the gun positions. We have 14 or 15 gun positions. And we have to go around and visit all of them. I said, well, you know, why is that? He says, what? He says, if anything's going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong at 3 in the morning, not 3 in the afternoon, okay? That's when soldiers are tired and they're grumpy. And he said, okay. And, you know, he said, we have an expectation that our soldiers will be awake and alert at 3 in the morning, so we need to be. And that's one way we can show it, right? And that way, if there's a problem, they want to talk to us, we're there. So, sure enough, you know, I go around and 3 o'clock in the morning, that's when I have all my problems. Show up, everyone in the gun would be asleep, which in the military is a bad idea. Okay, someone's got to be awake always, sentry, right? They'd be doing things they shouldn't be doing. Once I was on an exercise, this is a good lesson he taught me, because once I was on an exercise, it was a winter exercise, and we were in tents. You know, those 5.
Lean-tos?
No, these are proper tents with a liner in it for winter, but the liner was very flammable. So you were allowed to have a lantern or a stove in the tent, but someone had to be awake. And you were not allowed to light it inside the tent for obvious reasons, right? Because you get flare-ups and stuff, right? Well, I came by to this one detachment, and everyone was asleep, and the lantern's burning away like crazy. So I called the master corporal out, and I said, what are you doing? You're going to kill somebody. And the same thing, I caught him doing it again 2 nights later. So the thing is, if I'm not willing to get up at a weird hour in the morning and disrupt my sleep and go out and check that stuff, I'm not really leading by example. I'm saying, yeah, this is important, but not important enough for me to actually go supervise it. So leading by example is about, you know, doing the things that you expect of your, you know, in a military context, that you would expect your soldiers to do. And time again, I've seen leaders who fail in that regard. Whether it's in looking after their soldiers, like their careers, or making sure they get recognized for something they did, or whatever. Doesn't matter. I've seen it time and time again, hypocrisy in the military. Now, I would say it's a lot better than it was 15, 20 years ago, but there's always that element of it there. Why? Well, because it's run by humans like the church, right? There's going to be issues. So that's very good. Thank you for that. So this is the piece here. It's basically, you know, you have virtues, moral or religious beliefs, principles or practices, and they're not lining up with what you actually do. Now you can probably think of lots of examples in politics, in sports, in music, you know, all these financial industry of people who have had hypocritical behavior. You know, they say one thing and they turn around and they do something else. There's an abundance of it. That's the one thing I don't think we'll ever run out of. We might run out of money in Canada one day. We might run out of oil and fresh water. This commodity, if we could buy stocks in it, we'd all be rich, because I don't think it's going away anytime soon, right? Hypocrisy, it runs rampant. All right, so let me ask you a question then. Everyone clear on what a hypocrite is then? We all good on that? Okay. what bothers us most about people being hypocritical?
I found the front of them is a very interesting situation.
Okay. Does it give you a bit of anxiety having to confront somebody when they're hypocritical?
Certain people in my family are still doing that.
Okay.
And I'm just like, in the face, like,
So there's emotion, right? Because they're not behaving, they're behaving in a hypocritical way, and it creates a negative emotion in the family environment, right? Yeah, good.
it's like you're fresh kid.
Yeah, yeah. In a family context, it can happen too, right? So, you know, if I say to Lucy or my kids in the house and say, well, guys, help your mom clean up, and I never do it, I'd be hypocritical, right? Trust me, I do it, okay? I'm busy, all right? I got multiple full-time jobs. One is at my house doing my honey-do list. So that's part of it is I can't really expect my family to all pitch in and help clean up the house if I'm not willing to do something to help with that, right? Okay, and that can create emotional tension if it happens. Okay, what else? What are some of the other things that bother us about when people are hypocritical? Sure, yeah, it's denigrating to you, right? It's like you're a lesser person. Yeah.
It makes a lot of conflict. You know, like, personally, like,
Yeah.
my family life is like, really, like, perfect.
Yep.
Everything, and I don't want to be feeling like that anyway.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, Sarah.
It's not fair.
Yeah, it's not fair.
Because if I'm actually doing the right thing, and I'm not going to
Yeah.
talk about it, and then people maybe believe them, and they're getting
Yeah.
praised for something that they don't do.
Sure.
It's like, oh, I put the work in,
Yeah,
but they don't, so it's not fair.
it's good. That's very good. There's another piece to it which comes into the spiritual domain, which is when we're talking about the church, it actually brings Christ a bad name. So imagine for a minute you're the ambassador for Canada to another country. So I actually worked in an embassy in Australia. I told you that before. There was a military guy about to start a course, and for a couple of months I worked for the Canadian Defense Attaché, so the military guy who worked for the ambassador. So I was seconded there. I wasn't actually formally part. I didn't have diplomatic status or anything, but I was helping them. And there was an ambassador there, and he was Canada's representative in Australia. Well, I mean, if he'd been, drunk every night and, womanizing and rude to the Australians, right, and then, and behaved hypocritically, he said he'd do one thing and then did something else, then he's a poor reflection on our whole country, right? Right, because that's your ambassador? Are all Canadians like that? And that's what happens in the church. People see a couple of people on the news, they say, oh, that's why I don't like Christianity. They're all hypocrites. So one of the consequences to hypocritical behavior is everyone gets, is it too loud?
No, the cord, you're hitting the,
Oh, I'm touching it.
Sure.
Okay, there, is that better? You're the man. Keep an eye on this, it's good. Yes, Michelle? It is, yeah, it's basically a lie, right? It's dishonest, is essentially what it is. It's dishonest behavior, it's unethical, absolutely. So if the ambassador to, Canada's ambassador to Australia was doing that, we'd say, oh, that's terrible. You're reflecting poorly on all Canadians. And the same is true in the church. When one Christian does something wrong that other people know about, that's a reflection on the whole church. You could have a church of 1,000 people and 999 of them are great people, like they're truly following the Lord, and you get one hypocrite, especially if they're in leadership or they do something that makes the news, brings the whole organization into disrepute. And that's an important thing to understand. That there is a knock-on effect. It doesn't just affect the person who's being hypocritical, it affects everyone around them. So that's good. So now I'm going to show you a video. This guy, Kenneth Copeland, is a very famous U.S. televangelist. Now, I'll let you guys draw your own conclusions. It's a media outlet that's done the story. So right off the bat, there's bias. But I think they asked some tough questions that all of us need to ask any ministry we're involved in, or any ministry that claims to be a part of the Christian church. So listen to this. Okay, let's not listen to that. Can you check that one for anybody? I did this.
Denying some people have prospered handsomely. Wow! The pastors themselves, they live like rock stars with huge mansions, private jets, and fancy cars.
Oh yeah!
But when it comes to opulence, few religious leaders compare to Kenneth Copeland.
Amen. To show you his house, we rented this helicopter so you can see his 18,000 square foot mansion valued at over $6 million.
He lives in this home outside Fort Worth, Texas. It has beautiful water views and comes complete with a boathouse. But that's not all. Copeland is an avid pilot, and here's his pride and joy, a $20 million Cessna Citation jet. It's the fastest private jet money can buy. He said he needed it to better serve the Lord, and proudly did a flyby for his followers after the church bought it. But it's not just one plane. We found a fleet of planes registered to the church. And you won't catch him waiting in line at the airport because he's got his own, the Kenneth Copeland Airport, located right next to his mansion.
I think Copeland is unbelievably greedy. Amen.
She sent them a lot of money, a whole lot of money.
When Christy Parker's mother died of cancer, she found diaries that showed her mother sent Copeland most of her life savings, hoping her faith and donations would cure her of her terminal disease.
What do you think of Kenneth Copeland's lifestyle?
TV doesn't do it justice. Their office furniture is probably worth more than most people's houses. It makes you sick.
Amen. My lifestyle follows the scripture. We give, we believe, we're open.
You have a fleet of private jets. Why is that necessary? You're a minister. How many private jets do you have?
We're open. We're open.
Right after that, he walked away.
Although Copeland says he cooperated with the Senate investigation, the Senate committee disagreed, saying only 2 television preachers did, Joyce Myers and Benny Hinn. And the committee recommended that the IRS investigate further.
Amen. Amen.
So, Kenneth Copeland.
That's awful.
Now, obviously, the media has, so for example, anytime the media said something negative, they showed a video of him saying amen, which would lead you to believe that he's agreeing with it, which probably he's not. But there was one question there that really stuck with me. Does anybody, Jeremy, you were kind of honing in on that, one that really caught my attention.
The one when he said, when he prisons.
Oh, right. Yeah, at the very end.
Yeah.
When the
Reporter? Yeah.
When the reporter had asked him,
Why
do you have this? Why do you have these things? And he hits, and then where he hits on target on board is business.
Yeah.
That was
None
the
of your
last,
business.
the last word out of his mouth is business.
None of your business. Yeah.
Because it is a business.
He's serving the Lord.
Yeah.
I mean, this is.
And what did he say just before that? Did anyone catch what he said?
Open.
We're open, right? He said, you know, I'm a Christian. We're living appropriately, which is open to debate, and we're open. Well, I just asked you a question. Why do you have Why do you have a World War I biplane in your church fleet? Like,
A bunch of planes that he
yeah.
asked, right?
So anyway, I bring this up now. If you want, I'm not making a judgment on this guy. If you want to know what the truth is, you need to do your own research, right? I'm bringing this up because this is what's being reported, right? This is what people are thinking about the church. That's one example. I could pull a dozen up. Benny Hinn is another one.
Who's that lady?
Jim Swagger.
Who's the lady that does the? What's her name?
Paula.
No. I forget her name. She's pretty fantastic. My dad follows her all the time.
Joyce Myers?
Yeah, Joyce Myers. That's mine.
Okay, so some of them are okay. Like I'm not saying that everyone who's a televangelist is a bad person. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying you can't just assume that because they're on TV and they dress in a nice suit that everything is kosher, right? And in many cases, the behavior is hypocritical. So I don't understand myself personally how a $6 million, 18,000 square foot mansion with an airport and a boathouse models Jesus. I'd love to hear that explanation from Kenneth Copeland about how that lines up with, you know, Jesus saying, well, you know, if you're going to follow me, your pillow's going to be a rock. It's a little different, sort of. It's a contrast, right?
Like your
So,
kid is greedy.
I bring this up because this isn't the only one. Jimmy Swaggart's been through this, Jim and Tammy Baker. Seems like every time we turn around, there's another Christian leader in crisis because they're being scrutinized by the media. In most cases, it appears that the complaints are legitimate. In some cases, perhaps not. So that's one example of how apparently what I would say is hypocritical behavior, preaching one thing, doing something else, is actually bringing the church a bad name. Yeah?
Can I give like a short example? So
Yeah, go ahead.
So I don't know which preacher it was, but he was talking about how he had a private jet.
Yeah.
He was on his private jet, and God was speaking to him. And he stood up in his private jet and said, "Thank you, Lord." And he couldn't do that on a normal plane, so he used that private jet.
Wow. Yeah.
I'm just like,
Yeah. Yeah. So do your research, especially when it comes to supporting ministries that you don't have direct full knowledge of. You'll find oftentimes it's very easy to find out who the crooked ones are. And if by the way you're involved in a ministry, you're not sure, you need some help. I do actually do this quite regularly. I do research for people to find out if the thing is legitimate or not. Now, one thing you need to understand about the difference between Canadian and American registered charities. In Canada, we're a registered charity. We're federally incorporated, and we are a not-for-profit. We have a charitable number, and with that is a whole bunch of obligations. We have to file financial reports. We have to submit an annual report. We can be audited. In fact, we were audited about 6 years ago. Revenue Canada came in, went through all our books, said, "Yep, looks great. A few minor things to tweak. There's nothing wrong. Just a few little tips to help you do it properly." And all that stuff gets posted on the internet. Anyone can read it. There's no secrets, and that's because we are using the government's permission to provide people with income tax receipts for their donations. So if you're going to cooperate that way, the trade-off is you have to be open, right? Like if you're going to use that tool, which you don't have to, like we don't have to use that as a church. But that means we have to be transparent and open back to the government. In the U.S., the legislation is different. So they talk about separation of church and state, and so their charities are often what you would call closed door. They're not obligated under law to disclose how they spend all their money.
So they can just make a charity and let's be greedy.
Well, how does a charity end up with 5 aircraft that are all at his house?
Yeah.
Right? So I guess what I would say is it's much harder, it's not impossible, it's much harder in Canada for a charity to get away with that kind of, what would appear to be a gross expenditure of the ministry money, which is profiting one individual. Even if the church owns those planes, if he's the guy who's flying them all the time, effectively it's like his plane, right?
Yeah.
It's like you work for Bell Canada. Bell Canada says, "Oh, here's a truck," and you use to do your job, but you use it for everything, right? You take the kids to the pet park, you go buy groceries with it. It's the same idea. So it raises some interesting questions. So you need to understand that rules in the U.S. are different than Canada for charities, much tighter in Canada, much more regulation, much more of an obligation for the organizations to be open and accountable. And by the way, if anyone here ever wants to see our books, I mean, if you're having trouble sleeping and you want to cure for insomnia, we will pull out anything you want to see, right down to the receipts and how they were used. Now, no one here is paid, by the way, just so you know. We're all non-salary. It's all volunteers, everybody, including me. We have had time in the past when we've had some people on part-time salary. We just can't afford it right now is the reason why we're not doing it. I've never been on salary, and God provides me other ways, so I have no need to draw salary from Cafe, right? So we try to be open and transparent. And I'll show anybody, I don't care if they're with the church or not, doesn't matter. Some journalist comes in, here, sit down, I'll show you how we spent our money last year. Here's our reports, here's our receipts. Openness and transparency is a good way to avoid hypocrisy. I think you'll find a lot of the ministries that are operating that appear to have hypocritical behavior are not being very open and forthright. And this particular one, Kenneth Copeland, was cited by the U.S. Senate as being uncooperative in terms of providing information on his charity. Right? That's whereas the 2 other people, Joyce Myers and Benny Hinn. Now I have other issues with Benny Hinn, but that's a separate story. But at least they were cooperating with the Senate to give the information the Senate was after. This guy that we talked about was not. So that's a modern day example of possible hypocritical behavior. But even if it isn't, it looks so bad. Right? Like he's put himself in such an awkward position by not being open with the media about what those planes are being used for and where all the money's coming from and so on. That is just bringing discredit to the church, right, and himself, quite frankly. So we're going to talk about talking the talk. Now, this photo, who do you think is, now obviously not a real photo because they didn't have cameras 2,000 years ago. It's a photo from a film. What does this setting, anyone know what this setting is about? What's going on here?
The Pharisees.
Yes.
The Pharisees are basically telling Jesus or questioning Jesus about what he's doing and who he is and in whose name does he provide all these miracles.
Sure.
I believe.
Because they are the religious establishment approved by the Romans, right? Romans are a force of occupation. Typically what the Romans did was they let you keep your culture and religion, but you had to follow Roman law and pay Roman taxes and so on. As long as you followed those rules, then everything went fine. So they had no interest at all in some rabble-rouser coming up to usurp their position, right? As far as they were concerned, they were the be-all and end-all for understanding who God was and what proper religious practice was. Jesus' point to them is they're a bunch of hypocrites. They talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. We saw a bit of that last week in terms of how they prayed and how they fasted. So in Matthew 23, 23 to 24, we see him take them head on again. So I'll pull that up. Sometimes somebody get up. Michelle's got to get up. Michelle, are you up? Are you up? Are you up?
Was that your phone?
It might be time to get up. I tease Juanita because she has one of those phones. I don't know what it's called, iPhone, whatever, I don't know. I'm not a flip phone guy, okay? And I think it was yesterday morning we were going to sleep in, and then I hear whatever it is. Honey, why is there Chinese music playing downstairs? Oh, that's my phone. I forgot to turn off the alarm. Turns out it wasn't the alarm; it was somebody calling. And of course, they didn't get her the first time. So what do you do when you don't get them the first time?
Call them
Yeah, call them again, right? No, more Chinese music. I go like, oh, okay, yes. All right, back to the story though. The story. Let's get back to the story. What's going on here? What is Jesus telling these guys?
They're pigs.
Okay, and what says?
Well, but it says you strain out a gnat and swallow a camel.
Yeah. So what is that?
What's
that sentence saying?
It's like saying they give out such a small amount.
Yeah.
And they take in such a great
Sure.
amount.
Okay, that's good.
That's nice.
Yeah, that's good. What else?
You point out the small things and ignore the big ones.
Yeah. So they're focused on the wrong things, right? They're looking at okay, you tithe your mint, your dill, and your cumin, which are all spices, right? And herbs, right? So they can't. So a tithe was 1/10. So let's say you had a mint plant and you picked 10 leaves off. They would make sure that one leaf went to the temple, okay? Because that's a tithe. Oh, we got to make sure that that 1/10 of that mint crop goes to the temple, right? That's what they're worried about. But what are they not worried about?
The bigger ones.
Which are in this sentence here?
Justice, mercy, faith.
Yeah, just like the really big things that actually matter about people, right? They're focused on little minutia stuff, legalistic stuff. So if I use the example here, and I've used this example in the past, if somebody came into church this morning with a really offensive t-shirt on, I'm talking like maybe a very inappropriate picture, sexual picture, or swear words all over it, how would we respond? Okay? Anybody want to take a stab at how Steve Personnel would respond to that?
Could you please turn your t-shirt
Is that out yet?
No, that's not how I respond at all. Would you like? Nailed it. Would you like a coffee? Because I'm not here to judge people, right? Like, that person may not even be a Christian yet, so what right do I have to hold them to a Christian standard of behavior if they haven't actually made a profession of faith? Now, it's different when they become a follower of Christ. I can say, listen, it's probably time to change your wardrobe, okay? Because it's not really the same, it's not good messaging. That you're not reflecting what Christ would want. So it's time to have that chat. But when they come in, and I don't care how many weeks they come in, it doesn't bother me. Now, I've had this conversation with people in the past. I can tell you, there's churches where they would be escorted out. So what kind of a witness is that to people, right? So what I'm interested in is justice, mercy, and faithfulness, not whether you're wearing a good T-shirt or not. Right? That's the dill, cumin, and mint stuff. I'm interested in the other stuff. Okay? So we all clear on that? Is that all good? Yeah. Okay. Now, if someone comes in and starts insulting somebody, then I'm going to step in. I've had to do that. You guys will see me right in the middle of a service once. Okay? Stop the recording. Okay? I got to deal with an issue right now. I'm not putting up with that because that's just disrespectful. I don't care what faith tradition you are, or you're an atheist, it's irrelevant. Our rule here is we all treat each other with respect, right? We can all agree to disagree. We can be at different places spiritually. That's totally fine. That's part of the cafe experience. But what we can't do is, go up and be rude to people or insult their friends or that kind of thing. So if someone's acting up, maybe they're on a high or whatever, and they're being told. We've had that happen before. And what we say, let's get them off the stage, sit them down, get them a coffee. If they will not settle down, we will say, listen, you need to come back when your head's on a little straighter. We're not going to send them out minus 15 February weather and have them freeze to death, right? But the people that are here for a reason. And if that person is here and they're not able to function in that environment, they're probably the wrong time for them to be there. So we try to be compassionate and merciful. We try to be just. I actually don't care what T-shirt you wear to church. It really doesn't matter to me. Or what people wear when they come in. We even have people, come in, they swear, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. Okay, I think I've been hearing that word since grade 3, so I'm over it. Okay, I'm good. And one day, hopefully the Lord will do to them what He did to me, which He took the F word pretty much out of my vocabulary. Okay, I say pretty much because every once in a while I smack my thumb with a hammer and I forget, right? But I had to condition that word out of my vocabulary because I grew up in the military, and every sentence of 10 words had at least 6 F words in it. Okay, that's just how the Army did stuff, and that was part of me before I became a Christian. It took me a while to get that out. So. Bottom line is, I don't worry about the little stuff. Let's focus on the big stuff. And that's what he's saying here. A gnat is just a little bug, right? They're focused on the little bug, and they leave the camel in the drink. Like, it's such a stark contrast. Camel's like 8 or 9 feet high, right? Weighs, I don't know how much, probably at least 1,000 pounds anyways, probably more, compared to a little gnat. It's such a contrast he's given here about what they need to focus in on. Okay, so that's the talking of the talk. Right? They talk the talk, but they're not walking the walk. And this is what Jesus says is the solution to walking the walk. So take a read through that. I've highlighted a verse that I think is particularly important. We'll talk about that. Has he got a speck in his eye or a log?
A speck. I've got the log over here.
Okay, good. That's a healthy attitude. That's good, Jeremy.
It reminds me very directly of another part, not something Jesus said, but about keeping your own house in order before committing another.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. Yeah. So you got to be speaking from a position, what I call a position of victory. So if, for example, I'm struggling with pornography, and I'm able to overcome that, then I can go to someone else and have a chat with them about how I can help them overcome, work with them to do that. But if it's something I'm mired in every day, then it makes it pretty hypocritical for me to go say, well, listen, I got lots of advice for you. I'm a real expert, right? Like, really? Yeah, you're an expert in all the wrong ways. You know where all the good websites are, right? Yeah, so that's the wrong kind of expert that we want in our life, right? Yeah. Oh, have you been here? Check this one. Yeah, we don't want that. Okay. So what is this? This passage is from Matthew 7, so it's from a different chapter, right? It's earlier in the story, but it provides the walk the walk part. So what's the key to walking the walk, do you think? Yep, Sarah?
Pretty much take care of get your own stuff in order before you,
yeah.
And that way you can help others.
Absolutely. So get your own stuff in order, and Paul spoke to this piece too, right? Is before we launch off and start to criticize and bring other people down, rather than lift them up, let's make sure that we're dealing with whatever the issue is in our life. This is absolutely critical. So there's kind of 3 parts to this. The first part is you actually have to have the humility to recognize that you might be wrong, right? You gotta say, you know what? It is possible. I don't have all the answers to all the world's problems. That's the first thing. It's a step of what I call humbleness or humility. The second thing is you need an awareness. So awareness of what? What do you need to be aware of?
Yourself.
Yeah, what specifically about yourself?
Your spirituality.
Your spirituality, what else? Your flaws, what your temptations are, right? So this is very important, this self-awareness piece. It involves us sort of critically examining ourselves, and it's important. Mentors can help a lot with this, by the way, is to figure out what the areas in our life are that are under construction and need some work. And the Holy Spirit helps us to figure that out. The Holy Spirit's like a flashlight in a dark room that finds those things for us, all right? So in my case, I talked about, not long after I became a Christian, I realized I needed to get the F word out of my vocabulary. So through the Holy Spirit, that light was shone on that area, and I worked on that, all right, to get that out of my vocabulary. Before I became a Christian, I would have no reservations at all about going to a strip bar. I wasn't a Christian. Why did I care? Yeah, let's go. It's friends of mine used to call it the ballet. So, but after I became a Christian, I had to sort of change my thinking on this. And it was tempting when guys would say, hey, Steve, let's go to the strip bar. But now I'm a Christian, right? And I know that's wrong, so I don't do that. So I have no temptation at all to go to a strip bar now. That's not even an issue for me. God has worked that out of me, right? So we need to be aware of what our vulnerabilities are. So that's the third piece. And then the last piece is we need to actually take some concrete action to address it. And that might be speaking with your mentor. Confession is obviously important. Confession to Christ, that this area in your life needs work. You might do a course. So we have, for example, an Alpha course that people can do, which is a Basics of Christianity course. There's Freedom Sessions, which looks at a lot of addiction issues. There's many resources out there, books and so on, videos, that you can use to start to work on that area to develop yourself there and to address that deficiency, to help you walk the walk. You don't have to do it all by yourself. No one's expecting you'll have a lightning bolt come down and all the information will be laid out and you're all ready to go. It's not like that. Life's much more of a struggle. The other thing about this is that I love the idea of, again, proportionality here, right? He's contrasting a log to a speck. Remember camel and a gnat? And what he's saying basically to the Pharisees is this. All this, and the Sadducees, and they called them the scribes or lawyers. They were basically like legal, religious lawyers. What he's saying to them is, you guys are focused on a whole bunch of stuff that's so small it's actually not that important. What you need to do is you need to focus on the big stuff. So again, this contrast idea comes out. He's contrasting the things that are wrong in their life, which is they actually aren't connected to God at all. They're only interested in following the law, versus some of the people who they're leading, who maybe actually are pretty righteous people, but they're under the very poor leadership of these blind guides, as the previous passage talked about. So, what Jesus is saying to the scribes, Pharisees, the Sadducees, in the first passage in Matthew 23 is basically they're a bunch of hypocrites because they say one thing and they articulate all the requirements of the law in great detail. And they got it all memorized, but at the end of the day, they're missing the big picture. And then in this one, he's saying if you want to fix it, the first thing you have to do is acknowledge your own faults, which none of them appear to be willing to do. And as true followers of Christ, this is something we really need to register. We need to recognize that we're not perfect. Any thoughts on that passage from previously, the camel passage? No, all good? Anyone have a camel? No, just kidding. They're the most ornery, nasty animals ever.
They spit on you or something?
Spit on you, they're rude. Camels!
Oh, yeah, they sneeze.
Man, I'm sure glad they're not indigenous to Canada, let me tell you. I actually, when we were in Australia, they have camels, because what happened was, they brought camels to Australia like in the 1800s, because, Australia has lots of desert, and they figured these animals would be great in the desert, and they used them for like patrolling and moving goods and services, just like they did in Arabia. So then, the country modernized, trucks and planes came around, so people just let them go. So they wander around central Australia, pretty much, unmolested, and every once in a while you're driving down the highway and you'll see a roadkill, and it's a camel.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Kill you almost.
Yeah, oh yes. You will lose on that one, trust me. So the thing is, Australia now exports camels to Saudi Arabia. You know why? Nope. Well, they don't want any of them, I suspect. So in that sense, yes, there's too many. Because the camels in Australia have basically been in quarantine for 100 years. They're totally disease-free.
Oh.
Whereas most of the camels in Saudi Arabia, because over generations and generations, have picked up various ailments and diseases and genetic defects. So Australia exports camels to Saudi Arabia.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, pretty hilarious thing. But I do not want a camel, I'll tell you that right now. All right, back to the story though. That's a fascinating fact about camels. Our devotion this week, I encourage you to read Matthew 23, which is the first passage we looked at. And then if you're a follower of Christ, I'd ask you to ask yourself this question. Are you both talking the talk and walking the walk in all aspects of your spiritual journey? And I think if all of us are honest, including me, there will be areas that need attention. Whether it's a little thing that's come up that's on a regular basis, or a big thing, doesn't matter. At the end of the day, sin is sin. My question is, what is that area for you or for me? And then work on that. Commit yourself to trying to work on that this week. So that's one thing that you can be thinking about. And if you're not a follower of Christ, I'd like you to learn how to both talk and walk the one true walk in Christ, which is what Christ ultimately is calling us to, is to walk with Him. And at Cafe, we often talk about this sort of three-step process. You believe that Christ is who He said He was. This is what the Pharisees, Sadducees, and scribes could not accept. You acknowledge the sin in your life and repent, again, what the Pharisees, Sadducees, and scribes would not do. And then finally, you follow Christ. And that's a lifelong journey, and we can help you through all of those steps. And that's part of the reason why Woody and I think we were called to start the Cafe Vision 10 years ago, was to help people on this journey, I believe, for Penn Fall. So if you're not a follower of Christ yet, you don't really understand how that works, you can talk to Carol Ann or me or Philip, or there's lots of folks here who are already followers and can help you along in that journey. To summarize then, the purpose of today's talk was to look at the issue of how my religion sucks from the perspective of hypocracy. So people who talk the talk but don't walk the walk. And the key things I want to leave you with are, number one, we should not be looking critically at other people when we have the same issue in our own lives, right? Don't try to pick the speck out of your brother's eye when you've got a log jammed in yours, right? Secondly, we got to focus ourselves on the right things. And what the Pharisees, Sadducees, and scribes were focused on was a whole bunch of minutia about the law that wasn't important or was not critical. And they failed to understand the importance of justice, mercy, and faithfulness, right? These are the things that God wants us to focus on. The third thing we need to understand is that when we do things that are hypocritical, we aren't just a poor reflection on ourselves, we're a poor reflection on the people around us or associated with us, whether it's our family or community, or as I pointed out in the video earlier, the church, right? The church writ large. So it's important that we are both talking the talk and walking the walk. So again, if anyone would like to speak to me about how they can become a follower of Christ and experience the freedom that comes with that, I would love to do that. It's one of my favorite things to do in the context of my ministry time here at Cafe. Just before we close, I'm going to say next week we're going to look at part 4. It's all about me. And this is the whole issue of a society which by and large is self-centered. And we're going to look at some examples of some ways in which society encourages us to continue to be self-centered and not really think so much about other people or think about the communities we live in. So that's the topic for next week, and I think this is another great way for your religion to suck, is if your religion is entirely all about getting ahead, climbing the corporate ladder, so to speak. And unfortunately, some of that does creep into the church from time to time. So we'll look at that today. We don't have soup today, but we have lots of coffee. And I've always said, if I have to skip a meal, I'll never skip a coffee. Right? If you want to help out with soup on Sundays, we have 2 spots open next week, so nobody has signed up for next week yet. So if you're able to help, the sign-up sheet is there. Please do that. I'll leave it by the door at the end of the service, and I'll close this in prayer, and away we go. Lord, I thank you for our time together today. I thank you for the great discussion. I pray that each person here would be a great ambassador for you, Lord, and for those folks who don't know you, they would come to know you and also learn to be a great ambassador. Help us to talk the talk. Help us to walk the walk. Help us to be honest about where we are. And I pray your blessing on each and every person in this congregation today in your name. Amen.
Hey, Steve.
Sir.
So the newsletter's here. This is Dana's last newsletter, and she said the online will be published shortly. So
okay, so the newsletter is here, and it's at the door, the paper version, and it's on the website as well. Thank you.